deep. No, we're not going to walk out with any answers today about why bad things happen to good people in a way that's satisfactory. The only place you'll ever get that answer is in heaven. And as former Chief Rabbi Sachs says, I know the answers are in heaven, but I'm in no rush to get there. So life is a place of questions, and death is the place of answers. And that's important for me to give as an introduction, that life is the place of questions and death is the place of answers. Because an answer, it's the end of a journey. So for example, if you want to know the meaning of life and I give you the answer and that's it, and there's nothing more to explore, there's no more questions to ask, I didn't do you a favor. I ended a journey. A question is much more profound often than an answer, because a question leads you on a journey. An answer ends a journey, a good answer. And there are certain questions that there are no good answers. In other words, you don't walk out and sit there saying the meaning of life is that. I just sat down with a shiur. I heard from the rabbi the meaning of life, and it's all hunky-dory. I'm all fantastic. Mazel tov, welcome to me. I'm doing great. It doesn't work like that. There are certain questions, the deep questions of life, that the most we could ask for is just a little more clarity, a step forward in clarity. And when we get that, we're blessed. And that's all we want. That's all we ask for, is just a little, take me into the room. Let me explore this room. Let me see what's in this room. Even if I don't fully grasp every single detail, I want to go further in my journey. And there's no question that in the times we live in during COVID and tragedies, the question of why bad things happen to good people is coming over and over and over. And what I want to show you in today's shiur, at least for the majority, is how this question of why bad things happen to good people has been grappled within Judaism and out for thousands of years. And some of the stuff you'll learn with me tonight will blow your mind the way they blew mine. For example, did you know that according to some opinions in the Talmud, other than the 5 books of Moses, which were authored by Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moses through divine inspiration, there's one more book that was authored by Moshe. And that book is the book of Eov, Job. If you've ever gone through the book of Eov, you'll find it to be one big conversation about why bad things happen to good people, as we'll explore. And according to the Talmud, Moshe authored it. In other words, besides the 5 books of Moses, which he was pretty much commanded to, he makes one book that kind of he chooses to write. And what's the one book he chooses to write? To explore the question of why bad things happen to good people. It's fundamental to the Jewish ideology to ask that question. So let's start exploring together on this journey. Feel free to comment throughout this on the comment section if you have any question that needs clarification. It is being recorded, so you can watch it again if you want to just explore any of the thoughts in depth. Let's start with a piece of Talmud. Rabbi Elisha was walking one day and he saw a father and son near a tree which contained a bird's nest. Now, the Torah has many laws about not hurting animals needlessly. One of these laws is that if you're about to take an egg from a nest, you must first chase the mother bird away so that she doesn't suffer the pain of seeing her egg being taken away. So the father tells the son, here's your chance to do the mitzvah. This mitzvah is called Shiluach Haken. You're sending away the mother. Climb up the tree, shoo away the mother bird, and take the egg. The child climbs up, falls down, and dies. Rabbi Elisha was watching this whole scenario. Basically, there's a mitzvah in the Torah that says that if you want to take a bird, you have the baby bird that's in the nest, you have to chase the mother away if you want to take the eggs as well, and then you can do it. So much so the Torah tells us that you will get long life if you do this mitzvah. Rabbi Elisha is watching how this kid who's supposed to get long life from this mitzvah climbs a ladder, puts his hand out to get this nest, chase the mother away, do the mitzvah that Hashem says, V'harachta yamim, you'll get long life, falls down and dies. What does Elisha say? Rabbi Elisha thought, if God could allow this to happen, then I don't want anything to do with him. And according to the Talmud, that's one version of why he became a non-believer. So one of the greatest sages, he was the teacher of Rabbi Meir, who's the most quoted sage in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, the foundation of the Talmud, which is the Mishnah. The teacher of the most quoted sage, so you can imagine he was knowledgeable, religious, devout, watches a bad thing happen to a good person, and he drops his faith. And here is another version of why he dropped his faith. During the Roman persecutions after the destruction of the Second Temple, many of the great sages were tortured to death in the most horrible ways imaginable. We read about it on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, the famous martyrs. It's in Musaf on Yom Kippur afternoon. One of them was Rabbi Elisha's teacher, Rabbi Chutzpis HaMeturgam, the translator. Rabbi Elisha watched his beloved teacher's tongue being ripped out by the Romans and tortured to death, after which they did not permit his body to be buried. Rabbi Elisha thought that if God can allow something like this to happen, then I don't want to have anything to do with him. So either version of the story you go, what Elisha witnessed was pure darkness. Elisha, a great sage, watches darkness, and that makes him go off the beaten path. In the Talmud, he's referred to Acher, the other one, because he went off the path. So why did I start my shir with this story? Because what are we seeing? We're seeing a great Torah scholar, the teacher of the most quoted Torah scholar in the Mishnah, who sees evil. Either he sees a child die unnecessarily while doing a mitzvah, or he sees his great teacher, Rabbi Chutzpis, a translator, having his tongue pulled out by the Romans post-destruction. And he says, I cannot handle this anymore. I can't do with this. If God allows this to happen, then I don't want to have anything to do with him. Now, let's qualify one point. Let's go into the mind of this Rabbi Elisha who quit Judaism because how could a bad thing happen to a good person? The question how a bad thing could happen to a good person can only come from a believer. Why? Let's play two scenarios. Scenario number one, this world came into existence when a bunch of particles exploded. By circumstance, it happened to work. And over billions of years, it evolved into the universe the way we know it, with planet Earth, with animals that eventually became human beings. And this whole world is here by random. It's random. What I mean random is there's no design. The difference between believing in God and not God is fundamentally, was this world created by design? There was a designer who created this world with intention, or not? So if you choose not to believe, and it's a choice, then you're living in a world where everything is random. So the question why bad things happen to good people has no value as a question. It's not a good question. Because what do you mean, why? Why not? Why should good things happen? What is good anyway, and what's bad? And just because you decide that's bad and that's good, who says it shouldn't happen? Asking why anything's happening in a world that's random, it's like walking into a one-year-old's room who has toys all over the place, and you're trying to understand the logic beyond the mess. There is no logic. This one-year-old didn't have major intention with what they did. They just threw all the toys out of the cot. That's literally the expression. So why in the world would anybody try to understand the logic? Oh, tell me, my dear one-year-old who cannot communicate, what was the logic of putting that toy there and that toy there? It's random. There's no intention. When a person believes in God, when somebody chooses to believe in a creator, what they are saying essentially is, I believe that the world was created with intention, that somebody created the world with a design. And then I'm questioning the design. Why, in this design that you created, O Lord, is this world a place where people who do good, a place where people suffer? The question of fairness, the question of why bad things come to good people, can only come from a place of faith. Because otherwise, this is the way you deal with it. Why do good things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? Because why not? So what? It happened. Happens to the best of us. That's just the way the world runs. The world runs. It happens. It doesn't happen, etc. What's the question? Why ask the question? But when you believe, when you're coming from a place of faith, then the question is absolutely valid. And the question is calling out and sit there saying, God, you told us to do good. You created good. And you told us to follow the laws and to be able to follow exactly the way you want us to follow. So, dear Lord, please, why in the world are you making us suffer? So that premise is important before we continue. Only a believer can ask the question. Only a believer can ask the question, where was God during the Holocaust? Now, if you choose to answer that there was no God, then there's no longer a question. Okay, so where was God in the Holocaust? Obviously, there was no God. And now I understand how the Holocaust happened. Why shouldn't it happen? People, just genetically, based on the way we're made, we don't like other people. That leads into racism and anti-Semitism, and eventually leads to a Holocaust. If you take God out of the picture, then you can get your head around the question, because ultimately, why shouldn't it happen? Lions eat buck, and anti-Semites kill Jews. Why not? But when you put God into the equation, then you're struggling with a question. 1 second. God, you're the one that showed up and said 10 commandments. You're the one that said do not murder. You're the one that said what it means to be a good person. You're the one that told me what ethics and morals are. And now you're punishing the people who are following your way. This doesn't make sense. You gave the Torah and you are allowing punishment to happen. But if God didn't give no Torah and there is no punishment and there's no design, there is no question. There is no question about why bad things happen to good people. It's not a question. It has no validity as a question. So the question of why bad things happen to good people, both the idea that there's a thing called bad things, because if you don't believe in a God, then what you consider bad is not necessarily bad. I mean, whatever, just you decide it's bad. Unless God comes and tells you this is good and this is bad, how do you know it's bad? Is it bad that a lion eats a buck? I don't know. Says who? Is it good? Cycle of life? I don't know. You don't know if anything's essentially bad and good unless you have a moral, objective moral book that tells you this is good and this is bad. If you make up what's good and what's bad, what you think is good, the other person's bad. And I've shared this story before many times, that during the early 30s in Germany, before they went after the Jews, the Nazis went after the disabled, the mentally disabled, the physically disabled. And the homosexuals and others. And the story goes that in one hospital, when they killed the 10,000th person who was disabled, they held a celebration. And the doctor there, was a esteemed professor, comes and says, you know what? Sometimes I feel bad for what I'm doing. I'm just, euthanizing people. But then I remember the gift I'm giving to science. And then I get my peace back, because ultimately I'm giving a gift to science by taking out all the negative genes and keeping the good genes in. Now, to us, that sounds like pure evil. But how do you know that? He had a logic. And when people start playing moral relativism, in other words, it's relative. It might be good, it might be bad. Who says we're right? Who says they're right? Well, then you come to the situation where the Nazi comes and says, maybe I'm right. And this is an important idea. If there's one idea I want you to walk out with tonight from all the things we're going to discuss is, if you're asking the question why bad things happen to good people, you're coming from a place of faith. If you didn't believe, then your question would be no question. Okay, so now we covered that. So let's continue. If we believe there's a God, because we have to, we're going now with the assumption that this whole shir's question is only valid if there's a God. Maimonides writes, people who say things just happen are cruel people. Achzarim, they're cruel. Why? Because how can anything just happen in a world that has a designer? Nothing just happens in a world that has a creator who's doing everything with purpose and intention. It's like walking into an artist's chamber. You walk into an artist's room and you look at a piece of art and say, it just happened. That's very offensive. Excuse me, what do you think? I'm chopped liver? Well, I spent 40 hours putting this thing together. It just happened. Same thing. If this world has an artist, which we believe it does, God, to come and sit there saying, thinking about it, just happened. No, nothing just happens. The coronavirus didn't just happen. Maimonides is not telling you why it's happening, but he's telling you if you say that there's no reason to it, that's cruel, because you're just basically saying people are suffering and there's no meaning to it. Meaningless suffering is the worst suffering of all. If you go to surgery and you know that's going to make you better, at least there's meaning to your surgery. If you go and somebody cuts you up and does nothing and doesn't make you any better, that's meaningless surgery, then that's painful. So there is definitely intention in everything we do, as Maimonides says. So here's where we come to the body of this shir. What do I mean the body of the shir? What we're going to do together today is explore a fascinating book. If you open the Tanakh, what's the Tanakh? Tanakh is an abbreviation of 3 words. Tanakh. Taf, Nun, Kaf. Taf is Torah, Kaf. And Nun is Nevi'im, prophets, and Ketubim are writings. In one of the books of the writings, there's a book called Job, J-O-B in English. In Hebrew, it's the book of Eov. It is, according to many, the most incredible book in the Bible. What I mean incredible, it takes you to places. It doesn't feel like in the Bible. It feels like you're reading, I don't know, something between Animal Farm and ancient theology. It's just like, this is the Torah. So let me give you a short version of what the book is in case you've never gone through it. It's quite a long book. It's over 40 chapters. It's translated. It's on Chabad.org. It's all over the internet. You can find it easily. The book of Job, J-O-B. Story goes like this. There was once a man in the name of Uz, in the land of Uz, whose name was Eov, who had everything going for him. And let's read this book together. For a moment, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share with you a few verses of the page of Eov so that you can see with me how this book unfolds. It's quite fascinating. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was sincere and upright, God-fearing and shunning evil. Now 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His livestock consisted of 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of cattle, 500 she-donkeys, and very much production. And the man was greater than all the children of the east. Now his sons would go and make a feast in each other's house on his day, each one in their day. And they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Okay, can you agree with me that right now this doesn't feel like a Bible? It feels like a novel, like The Last One Standing or something. Now, it would come about when the cycle of feasting days would be over that Job would send and summon them and offer them burnt offerings, animals, early in the morning, burnt offerings according to the number of all of them, based on how many there were. For Job said, perhaps my sons and sinned and blasphemed God in their hearts, he would sacrifices on their behalf to God. Now the day came about that the angels of God came to stand beside the Lord. And the adversary, aka the Satan in Hebrew, you can see over here the Satan, came amongst them. The Lord said to the adversary, have you paid attention to my servant Job? For there is none like him on the earth, a sincere and upright man, God-fearing and shunning evil. And the Satan answered the Lord and said, dear Job, does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you made a hedge around him, his household, all that he has on all sides? You've blessed the work of his hands, his livestock has spread out in the land. Life is good. Of course he believes in you. But now stretch forth your hand, touch all that he has. Will he not curse you to your face? So the Lord said to the Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hands, but upon him don't touch. In other words, you could touch his possessions, but not him. So the Satan left the presence of the Lord. Now the day came about that his sons and daughters were dining and drinking wine at the home of their firstborn brother. And a messenger came to Job and said, the cattle were plowing, the she-donkeys were grazing beside them. And Sheba, the king Sheba, the queen fell upon them, took them, slew the youth by the sword, and only I alone escaped to tell you. In other words, the whole family is out, Job. There's nobody left. This one was still talking, and another one came and said, a tremendous fire fell from heaven and burned the flocks and the youths and consumed them. Only I alone escaped to tell you. This one's still talking, and another one comes and says, Chaldeans, which was a nation at the time, they came, formed 3 bands, spread out on the camels and took them and slew the youth with the sword, whoever was at the camels, and only I alone escaped to tell you. While this one's talking, another one comes and says, your sons and daughters were dining and drinking wine at the home of the firstborn brother, when behold, a great wind came from the other side of the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house, it fell upon the youths who died, and only I alone escaped to tell you. Then Job stands up, rents his robe, and tore his hair, fell to the ground, and prostrated himself. And he said, from my mother's womb I emerged naked, and I will return there naked, basically with nothing. The Lord gave, the Lord took. Interesting, we say these words at the funeral. I said it today at a funeral. Hashem natan, Hashem lakach. Yishem Hashem avarach. Those are some of the last words we say before we put earth on the casket. We take it from Job. Yishem Hashem avarach. Despite all this, Job did not sin, neither did he ascribe unseemliness to God. Now you think, based on this, that everything is fantastic. But as I could show you over here, there's 42 chapters in this book. In the next chapter, things start getting very messy and the life gets even worse. The Satan causes him leprosy and darkness. And at some stage, he's absolutely falling apart. And his friends come to visit him. Who are his friends? We're going to see in a moment. 3 friends with different ideologies. And in 42 chapters, what we do is we explore different opinions of people why Job, Eov, is suffering what he's suffering. But let me go a step first. Who is Eov? Have you ever heard of the guy? You might have heard of the book, but you open a Chumash, there's no Eov. Is he Jewish? Who is he? Who wrote it? We have no clue. The Talmud itself can't seem to agree. As I said, one opinion says Moses authored it. Another opinion says it was authored much later. They can't even agree if there was a real person named Eov. So forget about who the author is. Is it a mashal? Is it an analogy? Or was a real person? We don't know. So this is, in a way, the most mysterious book of the Bible, because we have no real information. We don't know if it happened, and we don't know who authored it. And yet, it made it into the Bible, into the canon, which the canon is the books that made it into the 24 books of the Torah. Why in the world is this random story about a fellow we can't even prove exists entering the Torah? Because ultimately, the book of Eov, which I encourage you to read, it's a long read, but it's a fascinating read and a hard read. Explores this question that we are questioning together, and that is, why is this world so imperfect? What is going on with our world? Why do we live in a world that makes no sense? The story finishes well in chapter 42. At some stage, he forgives his friends for the things they said, and he prays on their behalf, and all's hunky-dory, and he dies with lots of kids, and everything's fantastic. It's literally like all the good novels, and they lived happily ever after. But that's not really the gist of the story. Many sages throughout history try to explore the book of Job. They try to understand what was going on over there. What we're going to do is we're going to follow one book. You might have heard of this book. It's authored by Maimonides, Rambam. The Rambam lived over 800 years ago, lived in various places, in Morocco, in Spain, and eventually Israel and Egypt. And he's buried in Tiberias, in Tiberia, in Israel. You can actually go to his grave. Maimonides authored many books, one of the most prolific authors in Jewish history. By the way, in his time, a lot of his books were not accepted. One of the books that wasn't accepted was the Guide for the Perplexed, as you can see on the screen, More Nevuchim, Guide for the Perplexed. It's a very philosophical book. When you read it, you have to take context, and ultimately he's working based on the philosophy of the time. So some of the stuff, philosophy has gone in different directions, but it's very much based on Greek philosophy. He was a big reader of Aristotle. He quotes him a lot, and Islamic philosophy, the ancient Islamic philosophies of the time. And in this book, Guide of Perplexed, which many people didn't like at the time, and they actually had public burnings by Jews for the book, heaven forbid, but that's what happened. In his time, people burnt his own books. So right now, in these days, Maimonides is a whole hero in Jewish history, but in the time, it's not so simple. This book really pushed buttons. He was taking a very logical approach to Judaism. It's a big book, 3 volumes, tackles a lot of stuff. And somewhere in the third book, the third volume, he starts tackling the story of Job, Eov. And what he does is there's 4 characters, there's 3 friends that show up and talk to Job, as I mentioned earlier. And then there's a 4th guy who shows up at the end of the book. Who are the 4 guys? Eliphaz, Bilad, and Tzofer. That's the names. Again, we have no idea who these guys are. It happened to be that Esau had a son, Eliphaz. Esau's the son of Yaakov, but we have no idea if this is the Eliphaz. We don't know if he existed. Fine. And each one comes with their approach. And what's interesting, Maimonides summarizes their approach, which goes over many chapters. I told you it's a book of 42 chapters, and most of it is these guys talking. And he summarizes it into 3 main ideologies. What he calls the basic Jewish ideology at the top. This over here, this is the Jewish ideology. Then a next ideology is Mu'tazila, which is one ancient Arabic Islamic ideology, and Ash'ari, which is another Islamic ideology, both very popular in the time of Maimonides. Okay, so let's go through this. First, let's see how Job deals with it. He's the one that starts talking before his friends. Why? Because when somebody comes to comfort the mourner talks first. And that's actually one of the places we learned that from. The fact that the friends don't talk until Job talks. So it starts like this. He says, you know what? God is just too big for all this. I don't think God actually cares. I don't think this comes from God, Job says. And you know what? I've actually heard this philosophy many times. And who does Maimonides credit with this philosophy? Aristotle, Greek philosophy. And the idea goes like this. Aristotle agreed that God created the world, but at some stage he left it. Seriously, God's going to get involved in nonsense. He allows the world to go. Yeah, he's up there, but a big God doesn't have time for nonsense. And it's interesting, many people have this philosophy, even like Jews, fellow Jews. I've heard this from many good people who sit there saying, honestly, I don't think God has time for my problems. God is big, and my stuff are petty. There's 7.5 billion people. There's hurricanes, tsunamis, COVID. It's not my universe that God's watching over. So basically, Job, the way he's trying to make sense of it is, God doesn't give a rat. God doesn't even know what's going on. I mean, seriously, like really? Does the king know about the poor old lady at the side of a village 50,000 miles away from where he lives? Not a clue. Who cares? So God doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't. It's not that he knows about me and doesn't care. He doesn't know, so he doesn't care. And that was Aristotle's approach. And Maimonides attributes that philosophy to the words of Job. He kind of finds it within the words of Eov that that's what he meant. And then three friends start talking: Eliphaz, Bildad, and Sofer. Eliphaz comes with the first ideology. What's his ideology? He comes and says the following: there is a plan, but we don't necessarily grasp it. It's a big world with a lot of meaning and a lot of things going on. You don't have the full picture. There's a great analogy that describes Eliphaz's approach. The analogy is a caveman walks into a surgery. We've shared this before. And he sees a bunch of surgeons cutting a person up. And all this caveman could think is, these are sadists. But what's the truth? These guys are kind. If right now a caveman would walk into the hospitals and see people connected to machines, upside down on their belly, undressed, he would think he's walking into a torture chamber. And ultimately, these people are the front lines and the kindest people on the planet right now are in hospitals. Most courageous. So it's all context. Comes Eliphaz and says, your small mind cannot grasp a great God. But believe me, sunshine, there's a plan. There is a plan. And it will be okay. Okay, not necessarily the way you think, but it will be okay. So Eliphaz's approach, which the Rambam says is a Jewish approach, is God is doing things with intention. There is meaning to it. You might discover it, you might not. You might discover that the thing that was the hardest thing that happened to you in your life ends up being the best. Might be. You might discover it not. I've shared many times that in my life, some of the hardest things in life, which I still can't justify, I found deep meaning. For example, my father's death. My father's death was a tragedy that I'm still not over. I don't think I'll ever get over. But ultimately, it opened my heart to be a rabbi that can actually feel empathy. Until then, until I tasted death, until I was in the front row of the Shiva house, until it was my shirt that was being ripped, I didn't have the capacity to feel the empathy. Maybe I could have, but I didn't. I tried to be there, and I was there for people, and I hope I did a decent job. But the moment you're the one in the front row and you're ripping your shirt, it's a whole different story. Does that justify my father's death? No. But does it offer meaning that ever since then, I was able to be there for dozens of people, unfortunately, who lost loved ones? Yes, it offers deep meaning. Is that why God did it? I don't know. And the truth is, I don't care. It happened. But I'm finding meaning with it. I'm trying to find a big God's intention. And maybe I'm touching just a small bit of it. Or maybe that wasn't the intention at all, but that's the meaning I'm finding. And that's what counts. What counts is that I took a tragedy and I'm making it meaningful. And you could all have those stories. The difficult childhood, the struggling alcoholic parents, and the person it made you into. Eliphaz comes and says, God's not too big. No. God created that scenario. He gave you those challenges. You might not understand it, but there is intention. Go find it as much as you can. And if not, go create it. Go take that pain and make this world better. Take that hardship and make this world kinder. This won't justify the pain. Because let me clarify, neither Eliphaz, Bilad, Tzofer are justifying God. God does not need defense lawyers. And even if he does, I'm not volunteering. God, I'm not volunteering. I don't understand God, and I'm not here to defend him. But we're here tonight to explore philosophies on it. The next character who comes is a guy named Bildad, strange name, Bet Lamed Daled Daled, Bildad. And this is based on the Mutazila ideology, an ancient Arabic ideology, which basically goes like this. This world is a place of suffering. Next world is awesome. And everything you get in this world will play out in the next world. You might have heard that before. But the point is, to extreme, when you take this ideology to an extreme, in other words, it doesn't make you want to better the world, because the reward will come. Oh, so you heard Yankel is struggling with making a living. You heard Lisa was just kicked out of the house. The next world is going to be awesome. You can't make the world a better place that way. There's no empathy. So the Bildad's approach is, stop. This world is just materialistic and pathetic and not important, and it's not the real game. It's not where things really happen. Just chill, boy. It's all good. It's all good. In the next world, Eov, you're going to have the life of your dreams. So take it easy. All's going to be good, Eov. All's going to be good when you come to the next world. Says Maimonides, that is a Islamic ideology. Then there's the next Islamic ideology, Ash'ari. What's this ideology? It's articulated by Tzofer, who's the third friend. He comes and says it's all planned. It's all by design. But there's no free choice. Basically, God runs this world. There's nothing you could do about it. Nothing is in your control. Just get over it, sunshine. It's his world. It's not yours. You're just a puppet through the hands of a puppet master. Now, I want to stop for a moment. The reason I decided to go on the sheer with this specific approach, with Maimonides, with the book of Eov, is because when I found this article of Maimonides that explains it, I looked at this and I realized each and every one of us grapples with these ideologies, and many of us are often in all three. We're a mixture of all four, actually. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have sometimes we're like, God doesn't really care. Other times we're like, there's a plan. Other times, well, at least next world I'm going to sleep in peace. Other times, whatever, there's nothing I could do. Mensch trach, Gott lacht. Man thinks, God laughs, and everything's all good. It just, there's nothing, it's God's world. I don't have any control on my circumstances. It just is. And comes Maimonides and says, you have to make sure that your approach is a Jewish approach. Yes, there's some truth in each ideology, but ultimately, you do have free choice. Doesn't mean you could change the circumstances, but you could change your reaction. And you can take the pain and make the world a better place. There is free choice. You are not a nobody. And this world is not nothing. It's something. What we do in this world is meaningful. Yes, we get the reward in the world to come. But this world, we're here to make a better place and a more comfortable place for our fellow human being. And no, God is not too big for this stuff. Now, let's go with the assumption, as I said earlier, that Moshe Rabbeinu himself authored this book. Where does that leave you? Think about it. It's Moshe himself, it's Moses himself who's exploring these ideologies and saying, maybe it's Bildad, maybe it's Eliphaz, maybe it's Tzofer. Maimonides is the one who points and says this is the Arabic and this is the Jewish and it's Aristotle. But according to most opinions, this book was written before Aristotle, before Mutazila and Ash'ari. It's written a long time before. And this book comes Maimonides and says that Moshe Rabbeinu is literally exploring in his own mind, different opinions of why pain is happening. And I would ask you at this moment to actually think to yourself, which of these ideologies resonates the most? When you're going through a difficult time, which one of these do you fall back on? Do you fall back onto the God doesn't care? At least it will be good in the next world. I'm a nobody, it's all pre-planned. Or do you try, even though you can't grasp it, you know there is meaning, it is a good God, and I have to find intention. And there's no judgment in either one that we go to. Ultimately, each one of us has our own suffering. I'm not here to look into the face of somebody who's suffering and saying any of this. Let me be clear. I would never sit down in a shiva house and give this shir. I'm giving the shir as an intellectual exercise, not an emotional exercise. Because emotions, I have no right to talk. If somebody had come to me after my father died and started preaching this stuff, I wouldn't take it. Why? Because at that time, I need a hug. I don't need to hear about Bildad and Alifaz and Ash'ari and Sofer and Mutazila. I don't care. I want love. I want to feel empathy. What we're doing tonight, and the reason I decided to go through is because sometimes if we allow ourselves to go out of our emotions and to explore it from a mind perspective, we don't get necessarily answers, but we start getting a little more, at least a flashlight in the room. When we walk into the room, at least we know what we're looking at. We know which philosophies in our head are healthy and which philosophies in our head are not healthy. And finally, there's a fourth friend who shows up at the end, and that is Elihu. And he doesn't come and offer an answer. That's not his approach. That's not what he's here to do. What Elihu's here to do is just to say, there's hope. It ain't over till it's over, boy. And his approach is almost something that has to come together with the Eliphaz approach, together with the Jewish approach. Yesh tikva. There's hope. You don't know. And the truth is, Eov's life plays out very well. Again, it doesn't mean it will always play out. But there's a statement from the sages that says, Afilu cherev chada, even if a sharp knife, munachas al tzavaro shel adam, is laying on the neck of a person, al yimna'an atzmo min harachamim, do not hold back from compassion. In other words, do not believe that the miracle still can't happen. The miracle can happen. Doesn't mean it will happen. Can happen. This idea that ain't over till it's over. And that's why even when we have a sick person and we know that the time is up, we don't sit there saying the time is up until it's over. Because you never know. And I've seen many people closer to death than life that come back. And many people who don't, who die. We don't know. But Elihu comes with just this thought at the end and sits there saying, guys, after all the philosophies, yesh tikva. What's the lesson of, so Maimonides finishes off with this. And he says the following. I'm going to read it in Hebrew and I'll translate it. It's just a beautiful words. This was the intention of writing the whole book of Eov, of Job. It's to focus on this part of faith. And to awaken our thoughts. To use our natural logic. That you should not make the mistake and imagine. To never imagine that we'll think the way God thinks and that we'll understand his thinking. God does not think like we think, does not supervise the way we supervise, and does not behave the way we behave. And when a person knows this, each incident will become a bit lighter. And these events will not add upon him doubts about God. Im yada, lo yada. You're not going to ask the question, did God know or not know? Im yashkiach hayazav, was he supervising or did he leave? You're not going to ask the doubts about God will leave. And rather, Yosef alav ava, the person who understands this will now start loving God more. Like it says at the end of the prophecy, the people, the sages say, they do with love and are happy with their pain. Again, I'm not saying we have to become masochists, but what over here he says is, when you suddenly realize it's coming from a God, you can find meaning to it, and you can even find joy in your life because it's coming from your creator. And just like a child who knows that if they have a functional parent, even if the parent has to take them to an injection, take them to, to be immunized, the child knows, even at that moment of the pain, the needle's going into their leg or into their arm, mommy loves me. If I believe that God runs this world, and as I said, the question of if bad things happen to good people, how could that happen, is a question of faith. If I believe in God, then ultimately I learn to live in peace within the challenges. It doesn't mean, let me clarify, that I stop asking questions. We always ask questions. Why do we always ask questions? Because Moshe Rabbeinu asked questions. The whole book of Iyov is questions. And the point of the book, if it was only about the punchline, there would be no questions. No, ask, challenge yourself, go deeper. Allow yourself to explore the deepest questions and difficulties. Moshe himself screams out to God at the beginning of the book of Exodus. He says, Lama hariyos salam azeh. God, why are you so difficult to this nation in Egypt? Abraham screams out to God and sits there saying, really, do you have to destroy Sodom? Why? Why, God? And that balance, that tension, that fighting with God at the same time accepting his will is what it means to be a Jew. Do you know why we're called the Israel nation, the name Israel? When's the first time we see the word Yisrael? We see it in an episode in the Torah where Jacob, as he's heading back towards Israel after spending many years away from his family, he got married, he had kids now, and he was coming back with his whole family back to his father Isaac in Israel. And on the way, he has to bump into his brother Esav, who wants to kill him for stealing his blessings years back. And one day, he's crossing a certain river, Mahva Yabok, the Yabok River. And he goes back, after he brought the whole family over the river, he goes back just to bring a few vessels that were still there. And then he encounters an angel. This is the story of the book, in the Parsha Vayishlach, in the book of Bereshit, Genesis. And he starts fighting with this angel. And they fight the whole night. And eventually, this angel hits Yaakov at a certain part of his body, on the side, by his knee, and not by his knee, by the top of his leg. And that's actually why we don't eat the whole part of the animal, the back quarter of the animal, we don't eat, because of that was the place where Jacob was hit by the angel. I know that's where the best meat comes, but we don't eat from there. And eventually, Yaakov wins over, he has the angel in lock. And the sun is rising, dawn has come. And the angel turns to God and says, Shalcheni, let me go. And Yaakov says, Lo ashalechacha, I will not let you go. Ki im berachtani, unless you bless me. I want to walk out of this challenge with a blessing. And he says, Lo yikare ot shimcha Yaakov, your name will no longer be Jacob. Your name will be Yisrael. What does Yisrael mean? Kisarisa, because you fought. That's the word sar, the first half of the word. Yisra, fought, kel, with God. That's one of God's names, Aleph Lamed, like Elohim. You fought with God and you were victorious. Even though Yaakov walked out hurt, he fought with an angel of God and he's victorious. And ever since then, we got the name Israel. Israel means we fight with God. We fight with Hashem because we believe in him. If we didn't believe in him, we wouldn't fight with him. There's no one to fight with. We believe in him. And we fight. And we fight. And we battle. And we battle. God, why? Why is Corona happening? Why is COVID happening? This is ridiculous, God. Why did we have to bury somebody today? Why are so many people sick? Why are people in the hospitals? God, why? And at the same time, God, what lesson are you trying to teach me? You see that paradox? Why to God? What to me? I could scream why at God. Why God? Lama. Lama Hashem. As King David says in the 10th chapter of Tehillim, why God? But to me, I don't ask why. To me, I say, okay, Levi, what's the lesson? Lama. Lema. The same word lama, which means why, if you put other vowels on it, can mean lema. To what? What's the lesson? What's the message? What can I do with this pain? We fight angels, friends. That's what we do. We fight with God. We're a nation that's comfortable to fight with God. We get up every time davening and we cry out words, God, enough. Heal us. Bring the better world. Why? And I want to finish off with one insight, and that is the big picture. I've spoken about it previously when we gave the shir about Mashiach, but it's important to give the context now. Ultimately, this. We believe, Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shlema, it's one of the 13 principles of faith, that we will come to a better world, a world of no death, no pain, no hurt, no jealousy, no competition. And at that time, Oidcha Hashem ki anaftabi, we're going to turn to God and say, I acknowledge and I thank you for the pain, because now I see what it led to. The big picture of all the suffering and pain we're going through, the big answer, not just the answer each and every one of us goes when the person passes away and we get the answer in heaven. The big answer for all the pain we've been through is when Mashiach comes and all the work that we did led us into this new world, we're going to finally understand. But until then, we don't understand. So let me finish off my share with the following words. Nothing I said in the last 54 minutes was there to justify pain. Nothing. And nothing was to take away or acknowledge the suffering that so many people are going through in their real life. Nothing. I have no right, and it's evil on my part. What it was an exploration of our mind to go and ask ourselves questions, to go and see what Maimonidies thinks, what Moshe Rabbeinu thought, what the book of Eov tells us, and to just broaden our horizons on perspectives that could hopefully offer us a bit of comfort during this time that we have one big question. Why, God? What's going on? Why are we in this world? Why is 2020 halfway through the year and people lockdown? More people are dying now from depression. I wonder, every person that they tell me he or she didn't die from COVID. Yeah, but maybe they died from loneliness. Lack of companionship. Why, God? As if the world was perfect before that, but gosh, do we miss those days? And the answer never gets a good answer, only when Mashiach comes. Until then, all we can do is send virtual hugs to each other, send words of support to each other, show true empathy, and remind ourselves that there is a God who created this world and continues to manage this world. Hashgacha pratit, individual and personalized attention to each and every one of us. And nothing happens randomly, even the most terrible thing. And I'll end off with a personal anecdote. When I was held up together with my wife 2 years ago. But Chaya and I were thinking the whole time, and what she was whispering to me when they allowed her, like when they didn't see her and they just allowed her to talk, is, God's in this room with us. Thank God it ended without a trigger being pulled. But at that moment, for those just under 3 hours that we were there, God was with us. And when my dad didn't wake up in the morning, God was in that room. Nobody was with him when he died, but God was there. And even in the darkest moments of our life, if we can acknowledge that my God, the person who created, not the person, the being who created me, who gave me life, who put me in this world, is here in the most darkest moments of my life. Why he did the darkness, I don't know. But just knowing that he's here sometimes is enough. May we never have to give such a shir again. May we come into a world of no more pain. May Mashiach come. May this COVID nonsense end very quickly. But for every last minute we're here, I hope that what we share tonight can offer just a drop, just a tiny drop of a flashlight in this dark room.